Regular meeting of the Plan and Design Commission to order at 7 o'clock. Will you please take the roll, Mr. Fontaine?
Yes. Commissioner Henry.
Present.
Commissioner Arnold.
Present.
Mantis.
Present.
Commissioner Bruckman.
Present.
Commissioner Hecht.
Present.
Vice Chair Kirsch.
Present.
Chair Moore.
Present.
We have a quorum. Madam Chair, I recognize Council Liaison Annette Lenore is here, Corporation Counsel Martinez, and Student Reps Jackson Roberts and Alex Mendoza.
Wonderful. Thank you. Full house. All right, the first item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes from the February 6, 2024 meeting. Can I get a motion to approve those?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Hecht.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Bruckman. Do we have any discussion? I forget, is it a roll call vote, I believe?
This is a voice vote.
A voice vote for the meetings. All in favor of approving the minutes from the regular meeting on February 6, 2024? Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Motion passes. Minutes are approved. Okay, there's scheduled business. The first item on the agenda is public hearing 2023-ZTA-010 for the zoning code text amendment to modify regulations for tents and similar structures and other sections of the zoning code. Chapter 150 of the city code as appropriate. Do we have a presentation or a comment?
Madam Chair, we respectfully request continuance to March 5th. We have made progress and we're just trying to make sure that we don't have any conflicting provisions in the building code for that amendment. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Can we get a motion to continue that to the next meeting, would you like?
March 5th.
March 5th.
Thank you. Next regular schedule.
Okay, I'm sorry, who moved that? The motion was made by Commissioner Mantis. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Hecht. All in favor?
Aye.
Nays? All right, motion passes. This item is continued to the March 5th meeting.
And that will be in City Hall in this room.
Oh, City Hall in this room, of course.
Thank you.
All right, the second item is new. It's a public hearing, PUD-2024-00001, for an amendment to a special use permit in the nature of a planned development for modifications to the off-street parking requirements at 555 Roger Williams Avenue. So because this item is new to us, I will read the public hearing opening statement. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Highland Park Plan and Design Commission. My name is Karen Moore. A quorum of the Plan and Design Commission being present, the members of the Plan and Design Commission will now introduce themselves for the record from my right.
Ken Henry. Amy Mantis. Adam Hecht. Steve Kirch.
Marissa Brockman. Denise Arnold.
The Plan and Design Commission is charged with hearing applications for rezonings, plan developments, and subdivisions under the zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations of the City of Highland Park. In all matters, we recommend to the City Council based upon the testimony presented to us in the hearing. We are required to decide cases within 45 days after receipt of the transcript. All testimony is under oath. Both applicants and others who wish to speak on a particular case should present specific evidence as to why a proposal meets or fails to meet the standards for the relief requested. For clarity of our record, only one person at a time will speak, and all questions will be directed through the chair. We ask that you make every effort to not be repetitive in your testimony. Finally, we will make every effort to adhere to the schedule prepared. For tonight's hearing, if additional time is needed on a matter, it will be continued until the next available agenda. With that, I open the floor for the staff of the Plan and Design Commission to read into record proof of publication and ownership.
More proof of publication and ownership are available for viewing at the Offices of Community Development, 1150 Half-Day Road in Highland Park. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, do we have a presentation?
Yes, thank you. My name is Carl Burhoff. I'm a senior planner with the City of Highland Park in the Planning Division in the Community Development Department. This is a very brief staff presentation on the application. So there is an application by the property owner and their attorney for this site, 555 Roger Williams Avenue. It's a relatively new building in the Ravinia Business District on Roger Williams Avenue. The request is for off-street parking modification for first floor commercial spaces. Brief background, this was originally approved in 2015. It was a PUD, that stands for Planned Development. There were several amendments, but the most recent was back in 2022 for a personal training gym in the first floor, one of the commercial spaces, which was a CU condition. So that meant it needed a special use permit and had PUD amendment. And then there was that one off-street parking space modification. There's no changes in the site plan or floor plans or elevation. There's no exterior changes with this. So there's none of my slides have graphics. They're just all words. So I'll just walk through this really quick. So in summary, what the applicant requests is currently on site, there are 21 off-street parking spaces dedicated for the retail uses on the first floor. The applicant requests that those be deemed sufficient to satisfy any parking requirement for any and all permitted or that are allowed in the B2 or 2RW district. So when this was originally approved, it was approved for retail with a specific parking requirement of 3.3 spaces per 1,000 square feet gross floor area. That's GFA, gross floor area. By way of example as to what type of numeric modification this could be, because there was not a numeric modification in the applicant's materials. We took one of the highest off-street parking requirements that's allowed in the zoning district for the restaurant, excluding dancing and entertainment. It's a standard restaurant. It's a standard dine-in restaurant, but in the code it's called a restaurant, excluding dancing and entertainment. So the requirement for that is you have to provide 15 off-street parking spaces for every 1,000 square feet of gross floor area. Per the applicant's materials, the total tenant space on the first floor, all of it, is 4,874 square feet. If all of that was used for what's basically a standard dine-in restaurant, that would mean 73 spaces are required. They're providing 21 spaces, so that would mean a hypothetical maximum relief being requested is 52 off-street parking spaces. In reality, the relief will be less than that, because that would be for all the space. And gross floor area actually lets you take deductions, but we don't have floor plans for this, and so we can't make those deductions. Because in reality, they would get to deduct storage or stock area accessory to the use, they would get to deduct restrooms and mechanical equipments, and they get to deduct their kitchen areas that were occupied with any of those kitchen equipment. So in reality, the hypothetical maximum relief will be less than that. I don't want to speculate as to what it might be, but it would be less. I had sample parking requirements. I don't plan to go through these. These were in the report. If there's questions, I have these slides here to go over it. I want to come to the public benefit. So when an applicant requests relief, including off-street parking, they are required to provide a public benefit per section 150.515 sub B sub 1. In this case, the applicant states the applicant will help fund the Ravinia TIF District Streetscape Improvement Plan within the Ravinia Commercial District in an amount of $5,000. That was in the applicant's narrative. In reviewing that, the commission should review that to section 150.515 sub C. Those are the standards. The public benefit shall be commensurate with all zoning relief requested by the applicant and proportional to the anticipated impact of the proposed plan development on adjacent properties and land uses on the community at large. And this is an amendment. So the applicant did provide prior public benefit back in 2015. And again, this was in the report. The bicycle parking structure, $15,000. The parking improvements, there was more. I elaborated more in my report. Obviously, I try to keep this to one slide on the presentation. And then the streetscape improvements, sidewalk and certain poles along the project's frontage. I believe this is my last slide. So I do want to state public comments were submitted after packet posting. Those were distributed to the applicant and to the commission. Those were submitted after the posting, and so I will put those in the public packet for this next meeting. This, of course, will come to at least one more commission meeting. There were comments submitted, I believe, by, forgive me if I mispronounce the names, Gail Schaumburg and Josh Nannis, I believe. And I will make those comments public for the next packet posting. So they're just not in the packet because they came after the posting. One was in support and one was opposed, though I do not put words in applicants' mouths. Again, they will be posted and people who are here can testify, or I do not put words in people's mouths. So the commission should open the public hearing, take testimony. This is a public hearing. Deliberate and direct as appropriate. Direct findings of fact, can recommend approval with conditions, or denial of the request. Commission is a recommendation body. City council is the decision maker. Oh, sorry. I should have had a capital C on the city council. My apologies. Staff does have a recommended condition. If the commission wants to recommend approval, staff would recommend the consideration of a condition of approval that the requested additional off-street parking relief be limited to retail or restaurant uses. And that stems to the definitions at the beginning of Article 4. You know, this was literally one block of text, and I wanted to copy and paste exactly from the code. But it indicates in red there where I called it out. It is intended that only retail or retail-oriented service uses be allowed as allowed uses in the first floor of all structures that have frontage along Roger Williams Avenue within this district. That is my presentation. I can take questions. Thank you.
Does the commission have any questions?
That is the variance request factoring in a reduction. Transit oriented.
They received a 15% transit-oriented reduction in 2015.
Right, I saw that. But does this account for that? The numbers that we're seeing?
No, no, I mean, what you're seeing here is correct.
Just to point out on packet page 9, the image that we're showing of that site is not the configuration of the building as it stands today. I just want to make sure that looks like the old 7-Eleven. And then my other question is, what's the rationale for limiting it to retail and restaurant? And couldn't we get at that basically the same way by just saying this would only apply to permitted uses and not conditional uses?
I have several responses. So in terms of the rationale, I attempted to address that, stating what how the zoning districts are defined, and which includes kind of their purpose or intent that the zoning district is meant. And then here it says retail-oriented services, retail or retail-oriented services, and then yes, I mean the applicant has requested that all permitted and conditional uses that are allowed, all commercial. Well, actually, I should let the applicant clarify, but I think there's permitted uses that are allowed not have a parking requirement other than that, the 21 that are there be deemed sufficient. But yeah, the commission could certainly consider just permitted versus conditional. And I do want to point out that this is not waiving or modifying any future conditional use. So if the applicant comes forward in the future with a conditional use, they still have to amend the PUD and get a special use permit for that.
I didn't exhaustively read the permitted conditional tables, but it sure looked like for the Ravinia overlay, almost all of anything outside of retail and restaurant, which seems to be conditional. That's all I have, Madam.
That if the commission recommend that condition, that's certainly within.
Thank you. Any more questions? All right, sorry.
Sorry, so there's two public parking lots kind of within walking distance, correct?
I believe so.
I'm rationale is, I'm wondering, you know, if there is overflow, are those lots spaces that the public might be able to park in if there was a need?
Yeah, that's either a question for the applicant, or I can follow up with that. Actually, I'm not prepared to answer.
I'm just curious about that and whether or not there's any conditions or restrictions on timing for parking there.
Any more questions? All right, are we ready? Okay, are we ready for the petitioner to speak? So the petitioner.
Staff have no further comments at this time.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair Moore.
Okay, so,
Swear us in.
okay, so raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I will need everybody's name, spell your last name as you come to the microphone.
Thanks, Chair Moore. My name is Cal Bernstein. I'm the attorney for the applicant. My last name is spelled Bernstein. Cal?
There's no need to indicate.
My name is Alfred Claremont. It's spelled K-L-A-I-R-M-O-N-T.
My name is last name is K-L-A-I-R-M-O-N-T.
To answer your question, they are related. Just to answer the question real quick, is that there are, I believe, 4 public parking lots within less than a block of this location. A couple of those are metro lots that have metro parking during the day, during the week. They're available after 5 o'clock. We will be showing an exhibit shortly with showing the total public parking count in the area. That will hopefully show that there is a sufficient public parking in the area to support our proposed uses for this property. I guess the first question, why are we here? We don't have a use in front of you. What's the purpose of us coming before we actually have a tenant for this location? And the reason is that this building was built in 2019. Anybody who's driven down Roger Williams realizes that there's been a great difficulty leasing these spaces. What Al will be testifying shortly is the reason why they're having the difficulty leasing the space is the parking requirement, and it creates a situation of overregulation, which significantly impacts the economic viability of this project and is causing storefronts to be empty on Roger Williams. As I just detailed, these spaces have been empty for over 3 years. The conditions that were set upon this building in 2015 are not working. There's been an intervening event, COVID, since then, and the commercial and retail environment has changed dramatically since then. And Al will talk about how that has impacted this building and what the proposed tenants, the new tenant profile will look like. The existing requirements, which basically make it very difficult for restaurants to lease the space, would require any restaurateur to come before they move into the space to come before this commission and ask for relief, which is a very expensive project. It takes a lot of time, and tenants are not going to wait around 4 or 5 months while this board and eventually the city council then considers whether their parking requirement is being met. An important thing to note is that since this is new construction, I'm calling newer construction, there's a parking requirement for this building. There are 21 dedicated spaces for retail and commercial use. That is the only building on the street that has that requirement. So every other building up and down Roger Williams, a restaurant can go into that location and do it without having to provide any parking on site. Those properties are grandfathered. And so Al, as he's going forward trying to lease this property, is leasing the property with one hand tied behind his back because he's got this additional requirement that all his competitor landlords on the street do not have, because they don't have to do what we're doing tonight. They don't have 21 spaces dedicated for commercial use on their property like this property. They're relying purely and only on public parking. So We will review, my exhibit is up there, I'll review that after Al has an opportunity to discuss the leasing efforts that he's made over the years and the reason why we're here. And before I turn it over to Al, I will note that I had an opportunity to meet with a representative of the Ravinia Neighbors Association just to have their take on this. And I'm going to read the quote that he gave me. He's unable to be here tonight, but he says that the Ravinia Neighbors Association supports any initiative that enhances the economic viability of the Ravinia business district, which they believe that this request does. I'll turn it over to Al. Excuse me?
Who is it then?
Doug Barrington.
Doug Greenfield?
I have lunch with this. I'm actually coffee.
Well,
Ahead of the Ravinia Neighborhood Association. I think that's important.
I didn't know that. I think it's
We're going to quote somebody who that is.
absolutely.
Calvin covered most of it. I'll be pretty quick. I want to say that I built this building out of a passion for Ravinia. I grew up in Highland Park. When I was in high school, I worked on this street for 2.5 years at S&S Delicatessen, 594 Roger Williams. And there was a vibe in Ravinia in the 70s. And further, we had 2 grocery stores. We had a hardware store. We had the Venerable Gazelles. And we had 3 gas stations. And these were busy gas stations. You know, our cars only got about 10 miles to the gallon and always broke. And just a lot was happening on this street. I went to college, worked a couple of summers on the street, and really just loved Ravinia. Somewhat as a tribute, I built this building and have been very, very frustrated with the commercial first floor development. You know, after these gas stations went away, it seemed Roger Williams Avenue became a mecca for hair salons and nail salons, things we didn't really want. I think the best use for the vibrancy of Ravinia district is restaurants. I would like to see Ravinia be a restaurant row. I built this building with black iron on both sides and a grease pit to accommodate restaurants. It's been vacant, but for one small store in the center, for 3 years. A beautiful building, high ceilings. And why has it been vacant? Well, the economy for one thing, but the other, with the restaurant being the best use, there's been hurdles, all sorts of hurdles, especially for restaurants. This parking restriction makes it impossible for a restaurant to open. And pretty much only in our building, because a restaurant can open in any other building in the district. And for a restaurant to have to come before a commission and need permission and a special use, the months that it takes, a restaurateur is not interested to go down that path. Now, I have a tenant for this space. The tenant is Happy Sushi, who's 2 doors away. They've been there, this present ownership has been there for over 10 years. It's a fabulous restaurant. I really enjoy going there. Right now, there are no disruption to the street. They have no parking. Their lunch business, which brings customers, might compete for parking with most of the other merchants in Ravinia. Very, very mild for the lunch hour. Their dinner business is more robust. but they tell us 60% of their business is carryout. They're not a big parking user, and they're tried and true in the neighborhood. They want to add about 600 square feet. And I just don't see much of an impact that they would bring. Who else has parking in Ravinia? Walgreens has parking, and the Italian restaurant has maybe half a dozen parking spaces. Of course, they take a lot of their parking spaces other than the 6, and they put tables out there. They take that parking away. And this parking restriction seems to be only pointed to us. And we provide 4 parking spaces for every 1,000, which is typical for a retail use. We're the only ones other than Walgreens with parking. And we have a plethora of parking, 4 to 1. I think what we're looking for, I saw 73 parking spaces relief. I don't think it's anywhere near that much. I think you can maybe count it on one hand, maybe with some extra fingers, because in counting square footage, you're only counting the seating area of a restaurant. And in this case, with Happy Sushi, what they've laid out for us, their seating percentage of the space is 49%. The other space is kitchen, bathroom, storage, and utility. And it's only 2,100 feet. This use would bring a great vitality to the area that we so badly need. During these 3 years, we've had no other offers except for other restaurateurs. We've had one other restaurateur, 3 years. We're very active in the downtown. We own, manage, and lease 37 storefronts in the downtown area, in the B5. There's just no action in Ravinia, whereas the downtown is very, very vibrant. This parking restriction, which I say is, our need is really de minimis for the code. I don't see that it fits. And we want to fill the spaces, and that's what Ravinia wants. So I ask for your consideration. Thank you.
There you go. I want to take this opportunity because the reason why we looked at restaurants, and I'm going to go walk you through some hypotheticals in a minute, is that restaurants are the most intense use of parking under the code. Under the city code for a restaurant, and as Al pointed out, you have to deduct the support. There's 2 parts of a restaurant. There's the front and the back. The front is where the seating is, the back is everything else, the kitchen, storage, washrooms, hallways. So you really only have to count the front of the restaurant to determine what the parking count. Again, that's the most intense use that requires the most parking. In Highland Park, in this zoning district, the parking requirement is 15 spaces per 1,000 feet. So in the area, as I've noted if you looked on the screen, it shows that within a block of this property, there are 339 public spaces. And that includes the street parking, and it also includes the 3 metro lots and other parking that is available. And if you can scroll down, Carl. So I created some different hypothetical situations. There's 4,874 total retail space. After talking to restaurateurs, the The usable space, the front part of the restaurant, is usually between 33 and 50% of the restaurant. And that's why I calculated each based on those figures, 33 and 50%. Usually it will come somewhere in the middle of that. So if the entire 4,874 feet was a restaurant, based on this calculation, then you would need, if 50% is the actual front of the restaurant, you need 36 spaces. And we have 21 spaces on site. If 33% is the percentage, then it's only 24 spaces. That's an impossibility at this point because there's already a tenant in one of the spaces right in the middle. It's a personal trainer that's operating there. So that's highly unlikely, but I just wanted to say, worst case scenario, if you approve it tonight, what are you looking at? You're maybe looking at providing relief of, let's go halfway between 24 and 36. You're talking about relief of potentially 9 parking spaces. So if you, Carl, if you scroll down, if 75% of the 4,800 square feet is restaurant, you can see the math. So at 50% of the front, you're talking 27 spaces versus the 21 that are on site. And if it's 33%, it's 18. So if 75%, it's roughly, again, maybe 24 spaces if you split it down the middle. If half of the entire available commercial space was restaurant, and that's 2,400 square feet. Since we filed this application, Happy Sushi's come to the plate, and they're proposing even less than this. They're proposing maybe 2,100 square feet. So I didn't do that calculation, but I based on if half of the commercial space was a restaurant, then at 50%, we're talking 18 spaces and 33. So we're really close at 50%. And at 33% of being front of the restaurant, we're at 12 spaces and we would comply. So the question is, then what are we doing here if we rent a couple of spaces and we comply? Well, what Al's looking for is flexibility, and he's looking for an ability to lease more than 2,000 square feet to a restaurant if that if that opportunity arrives, because otherwise he's never going to be able to attract that type of tenant because the time and the cost for going through the city process makes that prohibitive. So in reality, by doing this math is that we're almost compliant at the existing 21 spaces. And that, again, is just unique to this property because no other property on the street, except for Walgreens, has a parking requirement. So the Italian restaurant, the brewery, the other Abigail's, none of them are required to have parking on site, only Al's building. So that's why we're here tonight. Carl did mention the public benefits that we're offering. I mean, there's no new construction here. This building's up. We're just asking this commission and eventually the city council to make this building viable and fill up the empty storefronts that have been an eyesore and have been a negative strike against Ravinia, and give this gentleman a chance to make this building work, because that's the trend. The trend is for those type of service business, whether it's a bakery, whether it's a coffee shop, whether it's a restaurant, all of those type of uses are more intensive. And because of it's a newer building, he has that over-regulation, there's that additional regulation, that additional things that he needs to comply with in order to make those work in those locations where next door or half a block down the street, they don't have the same regulations. So we're available for any questions you may have, and we hope you take this under consideration and try to help a local businessman make this beautiful new building actually work.
Thank you. Does anyone from the commission have a question for the?
Yeah, Mr. Bernstein, what's changed from, and maybe this is to Mr. Claremont, what's changed between 2019 and today when Mr. Claremont testified that the building was built with the idea that there was going to be a restaurant in that space, and he built it with a restaurant in that space, and he sought parking relief at that time? So what's changed from 2019 to today?
Well, what I would mention is that he built out the building to allow a restaurant use. Not necessarily that was going to be the use, but he just allowed the flexibility. What changed between 2019 and 2024 is COVID. And now that's really the only available tenant for this location, or a personal trainer. I mean, that's what this building's attracted. And, you know, that personal trainer has one person or two people in the space at a given time. I don't know if that's the intent, what the use that you really want for Ravinia. I think you want a more intensive use to get people on the street to go to this location, go to other locations, and then maybe support a retail operation. But now, I mean, the building was built because you can only build it once, and you might as well put that equipment in there so you could tap into it. So it allows you the flexibility. But again, it was never contemplated that would be the only use. COVID hit, and that's pretty much what's available right now.
If I can add to that, you know, 2019, pre-COVID, it was a lovely picture. Come 2020, it changed. And the thought of retail coming into Ravinia it's not going to happen. We're not going to have a successful shoe store or a high volume boutique. Just not going to happen. COVID and the internet, the world has changed. I don't consider retail space in a downtown retail anymore. I consider it commercial. Commercial is health and beauty and food. It's not retailing as we used to know it. And that's practical. We've had zero interest from retailers 3 years. Zero.
Any more questions from the yes?
Now, yeah, parking is universally the most difficult to do because you can't charge for it in the suburbs. So I get the desire to minimize the amount of necessary required parking. Has there been any analysis that you've done to show that making sure this is exactly the issue? Roger Williams has been troubled for a while. They've have tenants leave, and I keep hearing rumors that Walgreens stuff is gone. So is this going to solve the problem for the area, which has a surplus of parking around, mostly due to vacancy? There is a building just north of you, 565, that was a dry cleaner. It was just, I represented the seller. There's parking behind that in an alley that serves Viaggio and some of that's there. I don't have a problem with what you're requesting. I think you're being reasonable. Is that really what's the issue for Roger? It's been discussed.
He knows it better than anybody.
Well, I go to Happy Sushi frequently, and I observe the parking on the street. I go there for dinner, not for lunch. And I think, well, Happy Sushi moves 2 doors over. What's different? What's different is at night, they may have 21 parking spaces for their customers. They may have half a dozen tables at any one time being used. People come in and out for carryouts, quick. The difference is 21 parking spaces come to life, aren't being used right now, and the parking on the street that's being used for Happy Sushi is available for everybody else. It's a plus win-win. Does that answer your question?
Partially. And this is something that's bothered me for a long time. It isn't, again, Roger Williams just seems to have trouble attracting tenants these days.
Problem with the problem is it doesn't connect to a main street.
Right.
You drive down Sheridan Road, you don't know that there's a shopping district there. You go down Green Bay Road and there's residential before you get to the commercial. I grew up in Braeside and I was in Ravinia frequently. We know Ravinia people adore the Ravinia shopping district. I now live close to the downtown. And trust me, you never think of the Ravinia district anymore.
Right.
The Ravinia district is always going to be secondary to our downtown, and it doesn't have the infrastructure with the parking. When there's only 2 private parking lots, how is it going to be bustling? And in my opinion, retail is just not going to come back. We're not going to get the grocery stores. We're not going to get the hardware store or the drugstore. Restaurants are the salvation for Ravinia.
Member, I think anecdotally I can maybe help you with that question. Is that part of my practice, I do zoning work, but I also do real estate closings, both commercial and residential, and I'm doing a couple transactions residential in the Ravinia area. And what's attracting one of the things that is attractive for Ravinia is the people moving from the city looking for an urban type of environment where they can walk out their door and walk to a restaurant or walk to the train station or have that more of an urban feel because you have that right there. So again, this is not my area of expertise, but what I'm hearing anecdotally from younger people wanting to move back to Highland Park is that the Ravinia area is attractive because you can't create that type of district with restaurants, coffee shops, those type of things where people then you can access those more easily. So it may create a younger vibe as houses turn over in the area. It may create that vibe in Ravinia. To answer your question of what can be done for Ravinia is maybe to try to promote that type of, I guess, neighborhood. And it's not going to be a destination shopping area like Highland Park, downtown Highland Park, or other areas, but maybe have the opportunity where you can create that more of a neighborhood feel. And maybe that's the future. I'm just guessing, but I'm just saying, and from what I'm hearing from clients of mine who are looking to move back to the area.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that this is really the issue. That's all. It's a complicated problem.
Yeah. I mean, Joe, Ravinia has to reinvent itself, and this is one of the ways they can.
I think Joel,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Community Development Director Fontaine has a question.
Thank you, Chair Moore. So just one thing I wanted to mention, if you look at the existing building there, right? The parking that was originally approved in 2015, not 2019, that's when the original PUD was approved. It was constructed in 2019, the building, and built out a certain way, but that's when that was approved. It was set to a retail parking requirement for that ground floor commercial use area. If you were to just say, look, with the parking you have, the 21 spaces, you've got a tenant in there now. They do a square foot tenant there that was approved through an amendment. If they were to do as much restaurant as they could, the restaurant size would be about 2,500 total 2,500 at a 50% level that they were talking about here at the bottom there. So if you look at the exempt spaces and say that accounts for half of the restaurant area, just theoretically, and the dining area, the other half, you would need to have 18 spaces. Okay, so it's a 2,500 square foot restaurant all in. They've got a 900 square foot tenant right now that has 3 space parking requirements. That's all they could do. So you're talking about 3,400 square feet instead of the 4,800 square feet. So built in, if a restaurant were to come in, that's the maximum size that could be in there now, without any relief. And that would leave this other tenant space or otherwise leasable area not able to be leased without additional parking relief for any use. So I just wanted to point that out.
Right now, there's 3 spaces that accounted for by the existing tenants. There's only 18, so if you lease up half the restaurant, you can't do anything with the rest of it.
You'd have, yeah, space that would be, yes, if you lease what you could to a restaurant, which is about 2,500 square feet, then you'd have the rest of the space Vegas. You have 900 plus 2,500, you have 3,400 square feet leased. They have about
4,800. Yeah.
So you have permanently empty space there if you had that.
Yeah, no, I like to know that we're not going to come back here for something else because it wasn't really parking. I suspect you're probably right, but I didn't know if there was any potential tenants have said, we would come here if there wasn't a parking requirement.
I will say that's the reason we're doing this now is so we don't have to keep coming back here. As Director Fontaine mentioned, that if we lease the space to Happy Sushi and we have the other requirements for the personal trainer, then any other tenant going into the remaining 1,500 square feet, we would have to come before this board and ask for relief, and then eventually the city council, which is a 4- and 5-month process. So that we're trying to circumvent that and get around that so we don't have to keep coming back to the commission to make this thing work. And the reason is things have changed and restaurants are more desirable here than a retail.
No question. Okay. Thank you.
Councilperson Littleworth?
I just wanted to, other tenants, not at all on restaurants. And because Commissioner had a couple meetings ago about Walgreens, I went back to the city to double check, for example, what is the status, because I was very worried when you'd made that statement before. And Walgreens has a very long-term lease. And while there are some considerations as to different purposes in the building and parking, whatever, it's my understanding that there is no move to move Walgreens out. So I just wanted to kind of put that to bed. I also want to say, because I'm the liaison to BDAG, which is the Business Economic Development Advisory Group, we have brought in PT. We have brought in 2 restaurants, one restaurant and coffee shop east of St. John's. There is a lot of activity right now in Virginia. It is actually improving. The city put in an inordinate amount of money into upgrading the street signs, the benches, the bicycle racks. Everything is brand new. We are putting in a bicycle rack structure at the Ravinia train station, mostly because of Thursday food truck nights and other things to really invigorate the area. It is a TIF area because of a TIF, and frankly, the generosity of Mr. Claremont. There have been a lot of improvements, but because of it, there's also been a lot of interest, and there are spaces filling up. So I just want to say that I don't think the parking is the only reason, because I don't think that's fair to this commission, because we have done a lot to help improve, and there are businesses that are moving in. Again, not addressing restaurants, and certainly not West of. I love the idea that you have a tenant. I guess part of my question would be, well, then why not, like with every other application, why not come to us with something tangible so we can see if the 21 covers it already, rather than, what if a second restaurant comes in the other space? Is that space accounted for in this?
And to get to your point, a couple things. Number one is that with the activity elsewhere in Ravinia, those landlords don't have parking requirements. So they can lease their space to whoever they want to lease, to a coffee shop, to a cupcakes, whatever they want to lease. They don't have to worry about parking, except for this applicant does. We have 21 spaces. So to answer your question, is that right now, I mean, Happy Sushi came to the table after we filed the application. So that's why you don't see it here, part of the application. But we kind of like cover that with the 50% because the Happy Sushi is about 2,100 square feet. We have 2,400 square feet as an example here. So what we're trying to do is avoid having to keep coming back because as Director Fontaine mentioned, if we go forward with Happy Sushi and we use the 18 spaces that are showing here, there's no more parking available for the remaining portion of the property that's unleased. The commercial space is roughly about 1,500 square feet. So if it is another restaurant, or if it's a coffee shop, or whatever that use is, we don't have the ability to move forward without seeking relief from the Planning Commission and the City Council. And that's a very cumbersome process when nobody else in Ravinia needs to do that except for this applicant. And that's why we're trying to clear it up now instead of having to keep coming back and trying to get relief.
Director Fontaine.
I concur with what Attorney Bernstein says, with just one exception. It doesn't take 4 to 5 months. I don't anticipate this process will take 4 to 5 months. As a matter of fact, I was anticipating, I will tell you, and I can't presume the vote of this commission nor the council or the length of time it will take or what questions or information needs you have. But I would say it's more like a couple of months for something that is of this scope, this narrow scope. So that's just one thing. Otherwise, I mean, I agree with what is being said. What would happen is if they did do the bottom one there, about 2,500, 2,400, they would have a stranded 1,600 square feet of space that would otherwise be able to be leased, but could not be until relief was granted for that specific space. So right now, they could go forward with a restaurant. It would just have to be within the 18 spaces that, they could do the calculation. You could back calculate into a space, and roughly, there you go. That's what the size of the restaurant would be, presuming 50% of it is exempt. And I say presuming because we have to see the floor plans.
Right.
And that's a judgment call that we make at the building permit process time when we're looking for parking compliance. If we had that now, we could tell you exactly what it was. We just don't have that particular piece of information. We take the applicant's word for it. If it's 50% with the potential tenant they have, well, then we'll see what turns out on those plans, and that's what they'll be held to because the code only requires a certain amount, and they only have 18 spaces available.
Right.
I think it's pretty fair that Happy Sushi booths would not be just Happy Sushi.
If a restaurant, I'm not going to name a particular tenant, but a restaurant of that size would not need that.
Right.
Correct. I don't know what Happy Sushi needs. I don't know. And,
Those are the kind of information I was looking for. I don't.
Can you show the area, the site plan again?
area.
So that it's surface parking behind the building is the 21 spaces, and is there a lit pathway? I mean, to those 21 spaces, is that part of the original plan development?
There's very little lighting so as not to disturb the 30 apartments that are up above.
Because I honestly don't see that being a viable parking area for nighttime restaurant goers. I don't think that people even know that parking's behind there to use it at this time. And I think that if there is some sort of relief granted to parking, that parking that you do have become more viable, and whether it's signage or lighting or landscaping, or something to make it a secure, safe path between the parking to the front or the access to the restaurant. I'd like to see something like that, so that parking actually becomes viable and usable by people coming to the restaurants.
That's a very good comment, and we agree. Unfortunately, we haven't had that opportunity to activate those spaces because the commercial space remains unleased. It has been unleased since the building's been built. So signage and other things we can do, we're in agreement with that we're trying to make it as easy as possible for the customers to access ingress and egress in and out of the space. And we'll go back and look at the the site plan to make sure that there's that connectivity. And if there needs to be some lighting and there needs to be some signage, we're all in on that.
Do the spaces go all the way through to the back where you, retail spaces run from the street all the way back to the parking lot? Where you can
Can you enter from the back?
There's an indoor parking garage that's in between,
Okay.
For the residential units.
and a rear exit corridor for loading and unloading.
Okay.
So you have to walk around. We'll take a look at the site plan to make sure that there's access. Yeah.
Down, with down facing light along the wall.
Yeah, we'll look at that.
Oh, yes.
Just to be clear, Happy Sushi moving from one place to another will not make Ravinia more vibrant, number one. Number two, no action in Ravinia doesn't speak highly of your chances to lease any other space or to refill Happy Sushi, should it. Hypothetically, if you were to build this building again, would you, and you could ask this commission to waiver the ground floor retail, would you?
To waiver the ground floor retail?
If you
To
could
ask
build
what-
this building so
to ask
that-
what I'm asking tonight.
I'm saying if I believe we did this downtown where we said we'd rather see residential units on the first floor than empty commercial space.
I will mention, in my recollection downtown, it's there's an overlay zone north, central, that you basically, so it's not actually on central where you, and Carl or Director Fontaine can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding is that actually on central, you can't do
Right,
that.
I understand that that it can't be done under the current zoning. I'm asking if you would ask, if you could seek to change that, and we could have those spaces occupied, but they wouldn't be commercially occupied. Is that a better solution? I agree, there's plenty of parking. I don't have a problem giving you the parking thing, but I'm in sort of line with my fellow commissioners. I don't think that's gonna, it's gonna help you because you get to lease the 2,100 square feet, but it's not gonna help the district. And I mean, I think maybe we need to look for a more radical solution here.
Well, I think it does help the district. Right now, it's an empty store. This particular store stands out. When you're driving or walking westbound across the railroad tracks, this store hits you in the face. And to have a vibrant restaurant there is a pick-me-up for Ravinia. I'm looking for successful tenants. Happy Sushi will be successful here. You bring up the idea of residential on a first floor, very unpopular. I don't think it's at all viable to have apartments, looking out on a sidewalk. I don't know of any development that does that.
New York?
Well, I think that discussion is neither here nor there. We're not here to discuss whether or not we're going to put residential on the first floor of buildings in the Ravinia district. So I think we're going to need to move on. Director Fontaine.
Madam Chair, I just was, again, that's not before the commission. I understand the sentiment, but I just would say that, districts need to have other uses than residential in them to be vibrant. This is not a very big district. Yes, it has some vacancies, but commercial space necessarily does take a while to fill up and trying to get it right. And, we did adopt a overlay in downtown, but that's a much larger area of a downtown. And we still, in that case, did not include all of the downtown, but only a portion of the downtown in that residential overlay. So for your direction though, on task is before you is the parking relief, not changing the use in the character on the first floor from commercial to residential.
All right, do we have any more questions for the petitioner? All right, now we move to comments
Thank you.
Public.
Thank you.
So if you have a comment from the public, please come up, and you'll have to be sworn in, and everyone gets 3 minutes, and please avoid being repetitive. The microphone. Please state your name.
Elizabeth Fetter,
Okay, and please spell your last name for a minute taker.
Feder.
Okay, please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. You have 3 minutes.
One thing, okay, first of all, I should say that I am one of the residents in the condo building on Roger Williams, and nobody has mentioned that as any kind of an issue either way. I think that's a serious oversight for a lot of reasons. We have really limited parking as it is. People do, talk about revitalizing the district. People don't want to come as a guest and not have a place to park. I only have one parking space for my whole family. And I can tell you the units that have sold recently are going up and up and up in value. So that being said, and I think that, oh boy, I'm running out of time. I don't think that we should conflate, to Mr. Stevens' point, Mr. Kirch, I don't think we should conflate revitalizing Ravinia with parking spaces for that particular restaurant. I know I think they're two separate issues. I mean, most people will go to a good restaurant even when there's no parking, or they'll walk a block or two. So I also wanted to point out that I don't feel that Ravinia needs to be like downtown Highland Park. In fact, its draw is that it's quieter and it's more homey. I cannot tell, and I've lived all over in Bigston, Evanston, and college cities. I can't tell you how many people have come to see the condo and just marveled at what a great area it is and said distinctly, it's not like downtown Highland Park. So I think there are people that like to come here. The brewery gets a ton of business. I live directly across the street from Happy Sushi. Every time I've walked by there, it's dead, and I wondered how they won't stay, but I guess their takeout keeps them going, because I haven't seen more than a handful, even on a Saturday night, whereas Diageo's and the brewery are hopping. So I think finally, if it's a good restaurant, good restaurants come and go too, and the problem of COVID, I don't think is relevant specifically to this. There have been more small businesses that moved in since COVID, and I'm not going to take time to name them. And they've been really well received. Also, some of the big restaurants in downtown Highland Park have failed. The one next to the movie theaters. I don't know what it is now. I think there have been 2 or 3 restaurants that have moved through there, and that's a real shame, because you want to have dinner before you go to the theater, and you would think that alone would be a big draw. Plus there's residential and there's other things, and it's tough for restaurants to make it there too. So I think there's a number of issues, and personally as a condo owner, this would be a disaster, an absolute disaster for us. And more so because of the new firehouse. There wasn't enough parking before. Now we can barely squirm into our garage. My entire south view is blocked.
Okay,
And I just don't think it'd be a benefit for the neighborhood.
thank you.
Okay.
Next. May I please have your name?
Oh, Gail Schomburg.
Okay, can you please spell the last name for a minute?
Schomburg.
And can you please, let's swear you in. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Alrighty, you have 3 minutes.
almost directly across the street from 555 Roger Williams Avenue. The requested variance will disrupt my life in the following ways. Parking in my neighborhood is a big problem to start with. My friends often have no spaces to use to visit. When they built the fire station, which I love, they took out one of the 2 lots back there because they needed the room. I have no problem with it. I'd rather have the fire station there. I'm older. If I hurt myself and someone has to get me to the hospital or whatever, I'm afraid with this variance that they're not going to be able to pull in front and get me out of my apartment and get me into a car without blocking the street. I moved there because my family is very close and it was convenient. Parking's hard enough already. We're already losing 3 spaces. And if you come, there's either like all parking or no parking. I always have to go in and out of the lot if I want to stop in and get something from my house and run, because most of the time there aren't any places in front. I also believe that the lack of parking is a real problem for the small business owners. And they're hanging on by their teeth through COVID. These people are not the only ones, and I'm sorry that that's happened to you. It's just, what will happen to them if they all go bankrupt? Then what are we gonna do? And I screwed up my notes. Now, one of the things I did hear, correct me if I'm wrong, is that you wanted to bring a restaurant into this neighborhood because you like the neighborhood so much.
Okay, you have to
Why
direct
wasn't
your
this taken
comments.
care of when you built the building?
The comments have to be directed to me, because right now, I'm chairing the meeting, and all the comments go to me, and
I'm
if we
sorry.
need to ask the petitioner, we will.
Okay. You know, I'm just a nobody, so I could get this wrong. But I thought he said that when he built the building, he liked Ravinia so much he would like to have a restaurant in there. And is that what he said? And if he did say that, why wasn't that brought up when they did the plans for the building? Why wouldn't he have said, I'm thinking about having a restaurant, can we make it so that that would be, you know, in part of this whole thing before we make all the plans and build the building? That was, I'm sorry, I'm nervous.
That's all right, that's all right.
I am under the impression, I could be wrong, that we got certified letters if we were within 400 feet of this building. Because this is not going to just affect our block of Ravinia, it's going to affect the whole Ravinia. And it could affect all of Highland Park, because every time you get a variance, the way our laws are made, then it's a precedent for the next one that comes along. I don't know, you guys know more about this than I do. But it's scary. I'm also afraid that our housing value is going to go down because there's no place to park. I mean, and the other thing is with the restaurant, no one mentioned the wait staff and the people working in the kitchen, the different chefs and stuff, because they're all going to need parking. So it's just not the people sitting in the chairs and coming and going. There's a whole other band of people back there.
All right, thank you.
I would love to be able to figure out a place for parking. I don't know, unless you rent the area right next to the train tracks. I don't know.
All right.
I wanted to live here because it's so nice. I'm from Park Ridge, and my daughter moved here, and God knows I'm getting older every day. And it just kind of makes me sad, because I thought I picked the best building in the best area in the best town to live in so that I would be set. And I've got a building that's got 2
Okay,
stairs.
thank you, we're out of time. And I think we all understand
The issues.
it is difficult when we want our business areas to succeed, but then sometimes the price of success is it's a little more crowded and it's harder to find parking. So this is what we all have to deal with when we make these decisions. All right, so Mr. Burhap, could you put up the slide with the, is there any other any other comment from the public about this? No, okay. Can you put up the slide that discusses the potential motion that we should be making?
Well, Yeah, I mean, I don't, if staff had a recommended condition, if the, commission wanted to recommend, staff had a recommended, that the requested additional parking relief be limited. The commission wants to make a motion, the motion would be to direct staff to draft findings of fact, and then they continue it to the next meeting in 2 weeks. Findings of fact can either be for approval with, or for denial.
Okay, and then I think we had, comment by Vice Chair Kirch is if we did not limit it to retail or restaurant uses, we could also just limit it to permitted uses, knowing that a conditional use would have to come back anyway.
Correct.
Okay. So,
Sure.
Yes.
Before we start making a motion, if that's permitted, the applicant did, or I'm sorry, the objector did ask a question. I don't know if you want to give the applicant a chance to respond to the question. I think it was,
question was if you knew building the restaurant, you were building the building that you might have restaurants, why this wasn't taken care of in 2015 when the approval was made.
I think Commissioner Henry. The applicant wants to add it.
Yeah, that's true. And I thought we did cover it in that a parking allocation was made back then. And that included whether or not the retail space would be potentially restaurant or retail. Does the petitioner want to comment on that one last time?
Back in 2015, because if I did, I would know the answer immediately and I'd be able to report that because I have a tremendous memory. But I just asked the applicant, he doesn't recall why it was approved in this manner. I think that they kind of, as I'm trying to respond to Board Member Henry's question earlier, is that they put the infrastructure in to allow the flexibility, but they thought there was going to be more retail oriented, and they didn't really contemplate that restaurant would be the prominent use of the property. So it was, lack of a better word, it was bad planning back then. But this is the reality that we're in 2024 that we're dealing with, and that's why we're requesting this. And to respond to Vice Chair Kirch's comment regarding permitted use, rather than limiting it to retail and restaurant, we're in agreement with that. That's fine. We're okay with that condition.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Arnold.
I'd like the commission to consider, at least the staff to consider having them come back and show us what kind of improvements they'd make to that 21 parking space and the connection to the front of the building before we took a vote or made any motion on that. I think it's prohibiting parking back there that isn't linked with safe features to the front of the building.
My suggestion would be is that if the commission's inclined to move forward with the application and request that findings of fact be drafted, we can bring that information in front of the commission in the next time when findings of fact will be presented, and we could show you at that time instead of having to create 2 more meetings. And we'll be getting to my 4 or 5 months that Director Fontaine said that wasn't going to happen. We're trying to keep this to 3 months. So I think we could accomplish what Member Arnold is requesting, but still keep this on track.
Is that amenable to you?
Yeah, I mean, we meet every, so.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Henry.
I'm not, because I'm the new kid on the block, I'm not sure what your procedure is, if you have discussion between motions being made and voting or not. But I have a couple of concerns. My first concern is the action being requested is for that entire commercial space, okay? Which I think is potentially troublesome going forward. Secondly, if, as Councilperson Littler has indicated, and as we all, and I particularly have some knowledge of this, having served on the board of the Chamber of Commerce for 4 years now, there is work being done to revitalize Ravinia as well as other areas of Highland Park. Parking, as many of us know, if we're long-term residents of Highland Park, has always been a flashpoint in the commercial areas, be it central downtown district or Virginia, except those areas that have had the ability to build big parking lots. And I think we need to take a view from 20,000 feet up as we look down on this and say, what is going to be the impact of this going forward if, and I know it's a big if we're successful, if the city is successful in revitalizing Ravinia and things like that. So at least to the extent that one of the things that Mr. Bernstein asked for in his memorandum is that we waive a parking study. I'm hesitant to do that, and I would like to see a parking study because I recognize there's the Metro lots there. I've used them, and there's other parking there. I was at Diageo the other night, for example. Had to park a couple blocks away. It wasn't terrible. I could still walk. But I'd like to see what that looks like and how we look at that with a more a higher view of it going forward, because otherwise we're going to have Mr. Claremont or people in his spot or his daughter coming forward, who knows, 10 years from now, saying, you know, I need this because we weren't forward thinking in what we're doing. So I'm not necessarily opposed to it. Don't get me wrong. But I think we need to have a little bit more information in terms of making a recommendation to the council, whatever it may be, that is not only today's recommendation, but looking forward a little bit to how this may impact the area. And we may come up with the same conclusion, but I'd like to see more information.
Yes, why don't you, since there's a microphone there? All right, we have our student commissioner, Roberts, here to give us some comments.
Hi, yeah, I've been listening intently this whole time, and I just want to echo some of the points Commissioner Henry said. First off, at some point during this meeting, one of the things that popped into my mind is, what if all full and people have to start parking on side streets? I'm a resident of Ravinia. I live about 3 or 4 blocks away. I've walked past this building thousands of times. And one of the questions I have is that I know in the Ravinia neighborhood, we have the ability to park on the side of the street for 2 hours in normal circumstances. And I know that this usually doesn't take effect by people outside of Ravinia. Like if it's a neighbor who has some visiting, they park on that person parks on the street. If there is someone who needs to move their car, they park on the street and then they move their car back. But this usually doesn't occur when people outside of Ravinia are coming in until we get to the Ravinia season. So what I'm a little worried about, and I think this goes along with just having more information on this subject, is just knowing if all this parking becomes full in the middle of July, who's going to say that some of these people don't start parking on the side streets because it's free and open parking, that they're able to do this? It's free and open parking. They start parking on these side streets, and now the residents are annoyed because it's harder to get in and out of their homes. That was one thing. The other thing I'd just like to point out is that road behind where that parking is situated behind the building. It's a one-way street that leads back past a whole lot of other buildings, including apartment buildings and the backs of businesses. And it's kind of, the entrance is a little misleading as someone who's walked behind that building multiple times, just because it's a right of way and it's easy for me to stay off the street when I'm trying to get closer to downtown. It's very misleading that one, it is not consumer parking. So just going along with this, that it is consumer parking and not apartment parking, that is going along with the signage thing. And that two, that the way you enter is next to the building, right in front of the railroad. So if we have a bunch of people turning in right in front of the railroad, we could possibly have a blockage on the railroad as the railroad come down. So that's a little bit dangerous. I'd just like to point that out too. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a lot to,
I'm sorry, I just realized all that at the very end.
No, that's fine, that is so, I trying to get a feel for what the commission is thinking, if they would like to have more information, a parking study, if they're ready to go ahead.
I would be ready to move to direct the staff to draw up findings of fact.
Do we have a concern whether it should be permitted uses or just retail and restaurant uses?
I looked at, I'm not sure there's a whole lot of difference, but I think permitted uses, because that's in the code, it's more specific than retail or restaurant.
I would agree with that.
Staff doesn't object, I guess, that's.
We don't, and we will certainly point out what the difference would be when we come back, if there is any difference, but you make a good point in the permitted uses versus not permitted uses.
Okay, and you would be okay? If they came back with findings, if we had findings of fact directed for the next meeting, that the petitioner would come back with a plan for the parking lot.
Right,
Okay.
move the plans in 2
Right,
weeks.
this is true.
I think if we can streamline the process, no matter what the outcome is.
Right, we don't.
Everybody takes long.
All right, can we get a motion then?
If I could, Madam Chairwoman, I would move that we direct staff to draw up findings of fact, approving an amendment to a special use permit in the nature of planned development for modifications to the off-street parking requirements at 555 Roger Williams Avenue pertaining to permitted uses.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Oh, we need to do a voice vote. Oh, sorry, any more discussion? You're right, any more discussion?
Do we need to add that, the requirements for the existing parking upgrades to that motion as well, or?
Do we?
Friendly amendment.
No, so, Chair, if I may, it would be just like any other notes to the applicant or to staff for more information. If we arrive at that next meeting and you still don't have sufficient information, certainly you wouldn't be forced to approve or recommend approval based on findings of fact. You can just simply, as we've done just now, motion direct the drafting of findings of fact without that further specification of information. And then, as staff usually does, they'll have notes as to what else applicant has to present at that next meeting.
So we don't need to add a friendly amendment?
We do not.
Okay.
The applicant is aware of what's been desired from the commission, so. we'll work
Okay.
with them, yeah.
All right, so we had a motion made by Vice Chair Kirch, and we had a second by Mr. Hecht. So voice vote, please.
Roll.
Sorry, not a voice vote, I'm sorry,
call,
let's
yeah.
do a roll call, I'm sorry.
Commissioner Henry,
No.
Commissioner Arnold,
Yes.
Commissioner Mantis,
Aye.
Commissioner Bruckman,
Aye.
Commissioner Hecht,
Aye.
Vice Chair Kirsch.
Aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. The motion carries. Staff has been directed to draft findings of fact approving this with the condition related to the uses and with the understanding that the applicant will bring back additional information regarding the parking and the access and the way that folks will go in and out of the building and how they will be, how that path will be safe and welcoming.
Thank you.
And could, if I may, Chair, could we also get a motion and a second to continue the public hearing?
Yes.
The next meeting would be Tuesday, March 5th.
All right, can we get a motion to continue this to Tuesday, March 5th?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Mantis, a second.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Bruckman. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? All right, so this motion passes. The next meeting will be here in City Council Chambers on
March 5th.
March 5th
At 7 p.m.
at 7 p.m.
2 weeks. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, do we have an administrative design review update?
I do not.
Madam Chair, council did approve a minor amendment, plan development for District 113. That included an administrative approval that was ultimately approved as part of that minor amendment by the city manager, but approved by me, then the city manager, to allow for the solar panel installation on top of various buildings at District 113's high school campus.
All right, thank you.
Know that. Low profile, doesn't have an impact visually, yeah, so that it's the largest solar array that we have in the city, though, that we're aware of, and it's almost it's 946 or so.
Wow.
Quite significant.
They're gonna make money on it?
I don't know if they're going to make money. They consume a lot of energy as well, but it will certainly offset that, no doubt. And I'm not sure how it nets out, but it's certainly a positive thing in terms of sustainability for our community.
Okay, and then our next regular meeting will be May 5th, March 5th, 2024. I'm getting tired. Do we have an agenda yet, or what's planning to come to that meeting?
Yes, I know of at least 3 items that will be on that agenda. So the item that was continued this evening for 555 Roger Williams Avenue. And then there will also be the zoning text amendment for the tents that was continued from today to that date. And then also, there was a zoning text amendment from 2 weeks ago for fences.
Fences.
And so those 3 items I know for sure will be on that agenda. At this point in time, I don't anticipate anything else.
Okay, and do we have a case briefing on anything?
The case briefing actually was the design review.
Okay.
It was both, actually. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. All right, is there any other business from the public? All righty. With that, we need a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved. Seconded.
Moved by Commissioner Heck, seconded by Commissioner Mantis. Do we, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? This meeting is adjourned.